So if you've seen the title of the log, you know what's coming your way. So let me get to it. So I was talking to a beautiful young woman recently, and somewhere in the conversation, she was telling me that she was in a situationship. Now, this wasn't the first time I've heard the word. In fact, I'm hearing it more and more. And it got me thinking, what do we actually mean when we say we're in a situationship? Does it mean that the connection lasts only as long as the situation does? That when the situation changes, the ship sinks? Because if that's the case, I have a question. Who on this planet can guarantee a permanent situation? Life changes, people change, circumstances change, the things we love change, the things we believe change, and hopefully we change too. Because if we are exactly the same person 10 years from now that we are today, I'm not sure much living happened at all in between. Don't you think so? So if change itself is enough to end a connection, what exactly are we building? And the more I sat with that question, the less interested I became in the word situationship. What interested me was the thinking underneath it. Because it feels as though many of us are entering connections with the ending already in mind. Not consciously, but the exit route already exists. It's the possibility of walking away has already been protected and planned for, right? And I wonder what kind of connection can grow when the door out is more important than the reason for staying. Not because anyone is trying to be hurtful here, not because anyone is trying to deceive anyone, but because underneath it all may be a much older fear that says, what if who I really am isn't enough? What if who you really are isn't enough? What if this eventually stops working? All coming from a space of inadequacy. And so before we discover this inadequacy, we prepare for its doom. Before we understand one another, we prepare for our departure. And before we tell the truth, we make room for the day truth becomes inconvenient. And that feels like a difficult foundation on which to build anything meaningful. Because meaningful things rarely begin with certainty. It begins with curiosity, honesty, presence, and wanting to choose to find out more. And the more I listen to young people speak about their relationships, the more I wonder whether the real issue is not commitment. It's probably authenticity. Because I believe the other person might leave the moment they see the real me. And then that stops me from bringing the real me. I become careful, I become agreeable, I become manageable. I become whatever version seems least likely to be rejected. And the tragedy is not that the connection ends, the tragedy is that the real person never gets a chance to even arrive. The real person never gets a chance to even be known. But let's be honest, authenticity is expensive. People don't always celebrate it. When you're honest about what you want, you're called intense. When you're clear about your values, you're called rigid. When you ask for depth, you're called too much. When you tell the truth about your feelings, you're called emotional. And when you stop pretending to be okay with things that don't align with you, you're told you're overthinking. So I do understand the temptation to hide. I understand the temptation to stay vague. And I understand why ambiguity can feel safer. But at some point, I think we have to ask ourselves a difficult question. What is the cost of being accepted for someone I am not? Because if I spend months or years becoming a smaller version or different version of myself to keep someone else comfortable, eventually, who exactly are they staying for? Certainly not me. And perhaps that's what I've been wrestling with. Maybe the greatest freedom isn't in getting everybody to stay. Maybe it's no longer needing to become someone else to make them stay. If someone walks away from who I truly am, they were never staying for me in the first place. And that doesn't mean that rejection doesn't hurt. Of course it does. But there's a strange peace in knowing that what left wasn't connected to the real you, and that leaves room for something else, something more honest, more meaningful, with the permission to say, this is who I am, this is what matters to me, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I have to offer, and this is what I hope to build. If you want that too, wonderful. And if you don't want that, wonderful. No performance, no persuasion, no strategy, just the plain truth. And that's what I want for young people today. Not the courage to hold on, not the courage to commit, not even the courage to avoid being hurt, but the courage to be seen. The courage to stop managing yourselves into someone more acceptable, and the courage to trust that what is real has a better chance of finding what is real. Because if an entire generation begins believing that authenticity is too risky, then eventually nobody is ever known. Only performances are, curated versions are, and the safest parts of people are known. And what a loss that would be to humanity. Because every meaningful connection I have witnessed was built between two real people, not two edited versions of themselves. And perhaps that's the question I want to leave you with today. Not whether you're in a situationship or not whether you should stay or go, but this: are you becoming more of yourself in this connection or less? Because if the price of keeping someone is constantly shrinking, hiding, softening, and editing who you are, then what remains at the end is probably not love. It's a performance. And life is too short for that. So, choose meaning over management. Choose truth over strategy. And choose being known over being accepted for someone you are not. Because in the end, what is real, at least will have a better chance of finding what is real. And maybe the most beautiful relationships are not the ones where people never leave. Maybe they are the ones where nobody had to disappear in order to stay.